Today on Panelism, it's episode 100! We have a giant-sized episode of the books we loved, the books we didn't, also Frank Miller's honorary garbage pile. Welcome to Panelism, the podcast where we talk about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf. I'm Taylor Trask.
I'm Todd A.
And welcome, folks, to episode number 100. Todd, can you believe it? There you go. We need a vuvuzela. We need that vuvuzela from World Cup from 5 years ago. Whatever that horrible sound was when you've heard it times 1,000.
I did not realize that my phone was still Bluetooth to the speaker in my room.
Oh.
So this is at like extreme volume. So I'm sure my neighbors can hear this. Like,
oh, geez. It was serviceable on this side. I could hear it. Anyway, this is episode 100. Oh my God. If you've been with us this entire time, thank you so much. If you haven't, here's a quick little history lesson. Todd and I started this podcast as something called the Todd and Taylor Show back in 2015. And it was kind of on just sort of a lark, really. It was, he and I had these epic discussions not being recorded, and it was like, why don't we just record these? This could be kind of fun. So we started with what we lovingly call episode 0, which is kind of our pilot. And then we had 0.5 and just kind of rolled into this thing called the Todd and Taylor Show, where we talked about geeky things, TV shows, comics, movies, random rants, things like that. And then as that evolved, we had some other things spin off of that. There's a podcast we do called Wednesday in Westeros. That was all of our Game of Thrones talk. So that became its own show. A couple other things kind of became different shows. At one point, we decided that all of our comics discussions were actually what we really, truly enjoyed. So we kind of turned the Todd and Taylor Show into this thing called Coffee and Comics, which is, that worked really well. That became our weekly thing. And we started reviewing books as well as talking about what we were drinking that particular time and place. And, it's that sort of petered out after a little while. But more importantly, what we learned along the way was Coffee and Comics brand was okay, but a lot of people were, they had shops or other podcasts called that. And we kind of kept looking for a name. We kept looking for a brand that really sort of highlighted what we're doing. And, after a lot of a year plus of back and forth and thinking and just kicking ourselves, trying to figure it out, Todd had the just brilliant idea of calling this Panelism. And so here we are. This is Panelism, episode 100. Can you believe it?
I can't. I can. It's funny. I was thinking this morning, I was like, what, about 100 and like, does it need to be a big deal? And I've heard other shows where they, do a good memorialization of the show itself and like a clip show or something, which we do not have the time to put together.
Yeah, definitely not.
And we talked a lot about, what are we going to do on number 100? Because it's kind of an arbitrary signifier because there are more than 100 episodes in our feed. But once we started the numbering system, this is what we ended up with. So it's I think I was like, when I was thinking it over, I thought, I don't know that it's a celebration like outward so much as, wow, Taylor and I have talked to each other a lot over 3 years in a very agreeable way about, this is not, I don't know. You just think of all the interactions in your life and how much relative amount of friction there is in that. And it's like, no, we just talk about things we pretty much like. I mean, sometimes we have negative opinions on things, but between the two of us, there seems to be at least 100 hours of accord on things. It's like, yeah, I guess I was cultivating a sense of gratitude. Like, oh wow, I'm grateful we can do that. Week after week.
if we can do it, Israel and Palestine can too. Let's just give them some comics and some geeky movies and see if they can't come to terms on that. I was, as you were saying that, I was wondering.
Kushner's got that under control. I mean,
that's right, the Kushner's got it. Yeah. No, as you were saying that, I was wondering, like, is it disappointing that we don't have like that one episode that was like the epic argument that almost tore us apart? Like it seems like that's almost kind of a badge of honor in some podcasts to have that
might
one
get to
episode.
it today.
Ooh, we may keep listening, and we may. I guess in a tradition though, going back to coffee and comics, I do want to ask you kind of one final time, what are you drinking today, Todd?
Ooh, I put the can out of reach because I just told you I had a hot soda.
I know.
Yeah, I'm having so there's a market called Sprouts, and I'm having their Dr. Probiotic soda.
Oh, not to be confused with any other soda with the name Doctor attached to it, Bunny.
I know, and they couldn't even come up with something like there's 1,000 Dr. Pepper knockoffs, that are like Dr. Energy and stuff, but this one's just called Doctor with probiotics. If they have a little line called Live Sodas that are all probiotic sodas.
Oh,
and so there's 0 calories, 0 sugar, like 0 everything. And this one is sweetened with monk fruit. And it tastes like a Dr. Pepper.
It sounds like a Portlandia sketch. I'm sorry. Sweetened with monk fruit. What even is monk fruit?
Yeah, I have entered that world for sure.
Oh, my heavens. Well, I'm drinking hot white tea out of a rattlesnake mug.
Ooh.
So, and yes, it is a mug that has like the outside looks like rattlesnake. It has like the tail is like the handle. The outside it's not a real rattlesnake. It's ceramic, but the inside has like a coiled little snake, ready to strike at you. So as you drink down the beverage, the snake reveals itself. And I've had a couple of friends who I've given this to have a slightly, actually more than slightly, a surprised reaction and almost break it. So I'm fired up and ready to go.
Gotcha. Are there are there moments like you brought up that we've never had a big argument on this, like a hair pulling fight or something, but are there moments from the past 3.5 years that stand out to you as like brilliant moments that we've done?
Oh yeah. You know what? You put me on the spot. Yes. I put you on the spot,
but I preloaded some. Do you want me to throw in a couple and then you can speak up when something comes to your mind?
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll tell you, I really love the episodes we did after Comic-Con, I think in 2015, where we did one with my friend Eric Coda, who has been an artist for Marvel and is an artist full time. But that was great to hear about his experience being in Artist Alley at Comic-Con. Sad note, he's not in there this year. They changed stuff around, and they're not like just guaranteeing spots for people that have been in before.
Wow, that's unusual.
Yeah. And then we also did a follow-up with my friend Michaela, where we talked about, among other things, the experience of waiting for Hall H at Comic-Con, which I thought was really interesting. All of mine are like guest spots. And then our friend Emily Kelly Cunin, she and her husband had done a series that we distributed called Fan Theories, which hopefully they'll get back to, but they've obviously had been busy getting married and such. But she was in a couple episodes with us, I think Wonder Woman and Supergirl, where we talked about the Supergirl TV show, the Wonder Woman movie. And then notoriously, we did a live YouTube broadcast on the night of the election in 2016 that did not cheer us.
No,
it was like meant to distract us from all news, but of course we couldn't help but check news or headlines are getting, pinged to us. And it at least ended in alcohol, and possibly cannabis and Xanax for myself. That was I don't know what to think about it, but I'll tell you, I just threw those out because the guest spots I always thought were really fun. And you did a great episode with Mike Marlowe, which I thought was really cool to listen to as a, like an observer, just part of the audience.
Like a civilian, I like that one. I like the guest ones. I also we have a couple key episodes where we talk about the creative process.
Yeah.
Or the business of making things. So there's a couple different ones. I think our 2017 kickoff episode had a bunch of comics stuff, and then that, and there was a couple others too. So definitely go back and go through those. I'm going through our feed as we speak, and some of the titles are almost too fun for their own good. Like there's one episode 27 is titled Anthony Hopkins and a Lot of Naked Robots, which I'm assuming was our Westworld discussion. So I almost want to go back and listen to that one.
That was Howard's End, where we talked about that movie.
Yeah.
I don't actually remember if he was in that.
Yeah, and then one called that's titled "The Story is Kind of Garbagey," which I forget if that's. Oh yeah, that's Deadpool, Civil War, X-Men, Apocalypse, and then Suicide Squad. Yeah, so there's a lot. Batman, the Lawnmower Man. What? So yeah, there's a lot of discussions. But I will say this: it seems like the episodes, the original Todd and Taylor episodes that I still really like, are the ones where we talk about the comics we're reading. So it was kind of a natural progression to evolve from that it almost exclusively into a comics based podcast, and then now Panelism wonderfully packages all that up.
I'll call out 3 more episodes.
All right.
One was number 11, way back in 2015, I think, and that was the first one we did live in person. And when you were in Nashville and I was in Nashville, it must have been like end of the year or beginning of the year or something. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we recorded it in my parents' basement, like with a more or less real studio setup. And that was the first time we'd ever done a live podcast together. And that was great. And then
that was great.
When one time when I traveled out to Denver, we did 2 episodes. I can't remember if it was the American Gods preview we did or if we did a actual episode of American Gods, but we also did our Arrival podcast, and that was great because we went and saw Arrival
same
movie.
time. Yeah,
at
Draft House.
And then went back to your studio and recorded that episode. It was like the most fresh on your mind kind of episode.
That's right. Yeah,
that was great. Yeah, that was like a lot of fun. It just felt like the energy was there. We were both dialed in.
I had just set up my studio in Denver too, so that was
exactly
new and fresh and interesting and all that. Yeah. So a lot of good stuff. So if you're listening now, if you're just following us from Instagram and you're checking out the show, or if you've been with us for a little while, go back. Our whole catalog from episode 0 on is still available. Go and find this, find a couple titles you like, maybe revisit some of these that we mentioned, and just let us know what you think anytime. We're always loving the feedback. We've had several people from Instagram talk to us about the show or write in and say, hey, I'm listening to the show now. So, hey, thank you for that. And if you're wanting to follow us on Instagram, we are simply panelism.inc on Instagram.
Yes. And with that, I think we should start jumping into what we're doing today.
Let's do it.
We describe Panelism as a podcast about the comics and graphic novels worth having on your shelf. And we threw out some ideas about should we start with should we do a list of 100 for the 100th episode? And that got really out of hand because we knew we would want to maybe throw a couple of details in there for people who were unfamiliar with that. And also because I, as a person who likes to organize everything except seemingly his own house, wanted to organize it in such a way that we had every episode number listed, which is kind of a crazy thing. So 100 seemed too much. So we decided to break this up into a few segments, and we're going to start with comic books and graphic novels not worth having on your shelf.
That's right, because they're not all worth having. I'm sorry to say. We try to be as positive as we can.
Yeah.
And we only try to talk about things that we do, but once in a while, something slips through that we feel it's our duty, dear listener, to warn you away from some of these books so that you don't waste your time and your valuable money on these things that other people think are important works. Some of them are not. Some of them are not.
You'll notice even from this list that we're giving you today, it is a minority compared to our worth having list.
That's right.
We don't do episodes on stuff we dislike. The only time these actually come up in episodes is because we had already decided to talk about it, generally speaking, on the podcast, and then we read it. And then it was like, ugh. So I'm gonna start out with, as we're making this list before we hit record. I noticed a theme between at least 3 of the books. So we're going to start with the Frank Miller honorary garbage pile.
And it is a pile for sure. Now let's be clear. Frank Miller has done some genius work in his time. Batman Year One, Dark Knight Returns rank among, and then his Daredevil stuff ranks among some of the best works of comics in the 80s and potentially of all time. As time has gone on, he has gotten sloppier, more misogynistic, a lot of pick your poison. So I guess what's the first book on this list.
Yeah, I was the only one to suffer through this entire series of the two of us, and that was Dark Knight 3, The Dark Knightening, or whatever the subtitle was. It was huge. It had some crazy subtitle, right? I can't even remember now.
Yeah.
It came out maybe not last year, but the year before, and it was so stretched out between issues, and I was buying every issue, and I just decided I'm going to make it to the end. You gave up about 4 or 5 books into it. But we mentioned it in a couple of episodes when we were doing sort of catch-all, but I talked about it in like just sort of, put a period on the sentence in episode number 44. So if you want to go back in our feed, check out that episode, you'll hear about Dark Knight 3, which just didn't need to be made. No. What about you? What's the next one?
Dark Knight Strikes Again. Now, this is not a book we have actually officially talked about just yet. I mention it because on Instagram, we had a viewer/listener respond to my Dark Knight Noir post I put up. And I love the Dark Knight Noir just because I love the black and white treatment of that book. It's actually the purest form of Frank Miller because he wrote and illustrated the book, and then I forget. I suck. I forget who the colorist is, but I prefer the black and white version. So I was mentioning that on Instagram. Somebody said, "Hey, I'll do you one better. If you read The Dark Knight Strikes Again in black and white on your iPhone or on a smaller device, it actually kind of works because it feels like a little cheaper, and you can get through it." I took him up on that, and over my Christmas break, I tried to do it. I tried to read The Dark Knight Strikes Again. And I'm sorry, there is just nothing. There is no redeemable feature or aspect of that book whatsoever. It's not like you can even read it and go, like 9/11 had just happened and this is what he was thinking. None of that. It is the most it's like he got drunk one night and just kept going. And unlike Stephen King, he didn't write Cujo. He woke up the next morning and was like, this is awful. I'm still going to submit it. And DC didn't tell him no. There was no editor was involved at any time in this process. I can guarantee you.
And it looks terrible in color. The reason I've never read it is because I picked it up so many times when I was getting back into comics as an adult and would just open it up and go, no, I can't deal with this art. And I'd put it back down. Not to discourage anyone from suggesting things to us. We really love that.
Please do. Yeah.
It's so fun to hear that. But yeah, I'm glad you gave it a shot and it made the list. I've got what was actually supposed to be Dark Knight 3, which is Holy Terror. I've definitely mentioned on the podcast a couple of times.
Whoa. Was that meant to be Dark Knight 3?
So the story I think that I've heard, I can't cite it. It's been so many years, was that after 9/11, Frank pitched this to DC as a Batman book, as another Dark Knight book, where Batman was going to go around and fight terrorism.
Okay.
And DC said no.
This is after Dark Knight Strikes Again, too, right?
Yes, so and they're like, this is tasteless and Islamophobic and jingoist and xenophobic and whatever you want to call it. It's an awful book. Mm-hmm. So the story went that he rewrote it as Holy Terror, or not rewrote it, but redrew it, I guess. So it is. Okay. It is like Dark Knight Returns in that it is all Frank Miller's art, all his writing. And it's just awful. It's all those things, it's racist and sexist and jingoist. And it's like, just don't even bother. It's hot garbage.
Can I, real quick, going back to Dark Knight 3, because he did not draw that.
Correct.
Which is clear, but he did write it and he had cohorts help him. It's still terrible. Do you think there's a place for Frank Miller in the modern comics conversation?
That's
anymore?
Great. Oh boy, man. Now we break out of our quick 10-minute hit on this.
But we have to address this.
That's a good question. I don't know too much because it's been years since I've read this, but I think around the Holy Terror time, he sort of became kind of poisonous in that way. I was actually surprised that they ever made DK3 because he just said a lot of terrible things and was just like, as I understood it, just kind of a ranting, raving old man. And it was like, I just don't, what are you bringing to this? And I think DK3 was, it was a reimagining of some stuff in DC with sort of children of the heroes and stuff like that appear. But did we need that? Do we care? He wasn't deconstructing it anymore, and that's what's so interesting about Year One and Dark Knight Returns is that, he took this Legend of Batman and took it apart and made it new and like refreshed the character for us. But I don't know. I just don't follow him closely enough, to say he's out of ideas, but it's always bad when you become sort of a polemicist for your work and start writing like political screeds. So let's talk about some other garbage. There's two things that I'll hit quickly because they were in our last episodes. Something called Canon God Exaxxion, which we talked about in number 98. I mean, it's not a book that's even going to appear on your radar, but I thought we had an interesting discussion about manga as like it's some of the sexism and power dynamics that I read that I understood as I was reading this, and it made me sort of question some other manga that I've read. So I think that's an interesting discussion. And then the next episode, number 99, I had read Crisis on Infinite Earths, and we talked a long time about that. Which I think, and in that episode we touch on Dark Knight Returns and stuff, and we talk about how these things were happening almost simultaneously, like Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, and Crisis, within a couple of years of each other. And Crisis is just not well written.
No, or well drawn. It's just
and then on top of that, it has all these other problems. And anyway, that's episode 99. A third book that we don't think is worth having on your shelf, but I'll be interested to revisit it if they ever make volume 2 of this.
I think they did, actually. I think they did. You're talking about Wonder Woman Earth 1, which was Grant Morrison. And I apologize, I forget the artist on it.
I know. Who was that?
He's wonderful, but here's the deal. This was a book Grant Morrison had been talking about for a long time. So it finally came out, and I was eager to read it. Yeah, I'm a huge Grant Morrison fan. It is god awful. Like it's pretty to look at, but it is one of the few books I have ever bought and promptly sold again. Like I think a week later, I was like, get this shit off my shelf. This is just, it is awful. It treats Wonder Woman. I mean, for all the goodwill that the movie does and crafting this sort of innocent, strong, powerful, like just like completely earnest character, Wonder Woman Earth 1 just does not do that. It is cliche in the worst way possible. And just, if you love Wonder Woman, stay away, stay far, far away.
And this is one of the few books where we both read it. And I read it as well. I would not go as far as you saying it's god awful in the writing. The art, first of all, we both totally agree on this. The art is gorgeous.
It's wonderful.
And that's one of the things that is such a like a bait and switch to you and me. It's like we looked at, like a lot of times you'll have a great story and the art doesn't keep up. This is like the art is amazing. My beef with the thing is like nothing happens.
No,
it's
not
super boring. But I will say, and I think we mentioned this in our Wonder Woman episode, and I haven't read them, but I hear that the Rebirth volumes, oh my gosh, the writer just disappeared from my head. But those Wonder Womans I hear are like just amazing.
Oh, good to know.
That writer has done a great job with her. And that started sort of right after the Earth one. So yeah, if you're interested.
Shout out to Yannick Paquette. He is the artist on Wonder Woman Earth 1. And he's, like we said, that's the most frustrating part, is that the art is so goddamn good and the story and just the writing is so not. And it's just like, we'll get to more Grant Morrison titles as we go here, but this was just so disappointing considering how long he was working on it.
Yeah, both creators, I mean, obviously we've raved about the art. We think highly of Grant Morrison. This just wasn't our cup of tea at all. But let's forget the bad stuff. That's all we're going to touch on with not worth having on your shelf. We just wanted to include it in like a sense of fairness or something. But let's talk about the good stuff.
All the good stuff. The rest of this episode is going to be nothing but good stuff. So strap in. If you are wanting to refill your pull list, or you've got some empty space on your shelf, or you just want to enter in 2019 just going, hey, give me some good stuff every time I go into the shop. What can I get? This is that list. And I should caution you, try as we may, there is no way for us to put this in any order. It's going to kind of sound like a countdown, like Casey Kasem countdown, but it's not. It's in no particular order. These are just books that we have mostly talked about in past episodes, and we'll try to shout those out whenever possible. And then just say a little, give a little bit, another nod to them, maybe a little bit extra context. And I will say both this entire list, as well as the books we don't like, are going to appear on our Pinterest account. That is just Pinterest.com/Panelism, just /Panelism. And we'll have all the books we recommend there, and we'll keep sharing them on Instagram too if you are a Instagram follower. And we thank you for that. So to start off this list, this is all the stuff that we like. I'm gonna give a note to Kingdom Come, which is one of those books I had not read, sadly, for the longest time. This year I finally grabbed it, busted it out. Episode 58 is that review. And, it's wonderful. It is, as much as Crisis on Infinite Earths is lauded as like this important book and just fails to live up to that, Kingdom Come is the opposite. You always hear about Kingdom Come. Everybody talks about what a great seminal work it is by Mark Wade and Alex Ross. And it's wonderful. The story is wonderful. The art is absolutely breathtaking. It's that classic, really stylized, almost like Art Deco kind of art. That you see usually on covers, but never as like a full book. I highly recommend you get it. And if you can get it as a hardcover, do that too. You will not be sorry.
Yeah. Alex Ross, that art is unbelievable. And it's like iconic.
Totally. So, yeah. And you see it pop up and a lot, like he'll do a cover or two and you're like, oh, is this another Kingdom Come book? And it's just a variant, sadly.
Yeah. No, I think you posted what you posted on our Instagram account last week from Crisis was the Alex Ross variant cover.
Yeah.
That I sent you on purpose for that reason.
Yeah. And it totally makes Crisis seem like it's so much better than it is.
Yeah.
You're like, wait, oh, okay. But Kingdom Come is absolutely everything you hoped it would be and more. So grab that one.
That's a huge one. Like that should be on your radar. I got one that's probably not on your radar, which is an Image Comics title called Rocket Girl. There are only 2 volumes of this. And I remember teasing you when the second volume came out by saying this has a Hodor moment to beat Hodor.
That's right.
Because it involves time travel. It is about a teenage cop, because that's what they have in the future, who goes back in time to the 80s to solve the problem that is going to affect, her generation. Mm-hmm. So it's got all these 80s references, it's got all this sci-fi.
She goes back and kills Donald Trump. That's what it is, right? Right?
That is not what it is. But
sorry,
totally derailed.
You're just saying 80s and problems, and
we had no idea. No one even knew, 3 years ago that was going to be.
That's true. Yeah, that's true.
But it is. I discussed both volumes because I was so excited about it. Number 46, episode number 46 is volume 1, and episode number 63 is where I tease you with that. That Hodor moment kind of thing. But I definitely think it's worth having. And it's 2 volumes, so you can easily read the whole thing. And it's going to be like a great weekend read, or if you're able to stretch it out longer than that, you'll really like it.
I will say, and I'm curious to hear your thoughts too. As we have gone, there are several books that you have reviewed that I had never touched that I have since picked up, and Rocket Girl Volume 1 is one of them.
Oh, awesome.
Just have not had a chance to get to the second volume yet. So, I completely agree. It is quirky and fun and very unique. I mean, it's got the time travel motifs and tropes, but it works wonderfully. And just continues that tradition of Image really just crushing it on unique indie creative titles.
Yeah. Hit me with another one.
Well, another Image title is Postal. And now this one, oh my God, episode 53, I talk about Postal in a big bad way. All I'll say is this. If you ever wanted the best comic series or graphic novel that could make the best possible TV show that hasn't yet been turned into a TV show, here it is. Postal is basically like a storyboard for the best goddamn thing you've ever seen. If you like True Detective, if you like, even Breaking Bad, there's a lot of sort of, of that working through this too. You'll love Postal. It's about a little town in Wyoming called Eden, Wyoming. And it's where all the criminals go, and it's off the map. Nobody knows it's there. And if you're a criminal and you can find your way there, you basically have a home. And the whole series, which is now since concluded, is about what happens in this town, the woman who runs it, and the main character, her son, who is the mailman, hence the name Postal. He has Asperger's, so he's kind of got a bit of a sort of a Sherlock Holmes quality to him. He's able to solve crimes and put puzzles together very quickly. So just wonderful, wonderful title. Again, by Image. And I mean, start with volume 1, issue 1, and you will not stop. I
got one that is, I felt a little weird including this. because I'm kind of conflicted after the Canon God Exaxxion episode. But I said the original Ghost in the Shell is worth checking out. It's on Dark Horse. I'm assuming it's early 90s, possibly late 80s. And it was also iconic, I think, in the manga world, especially what came over to the States. At least when I was younger and reading comics, it was like this was one of the big ones, sort of like Akira was the anime to get into. This was the book to get into. And I talked about that along with the movie in episode number 39. So I don't know that you'll get a whole lot of review of the manga. And a lot of, I admit a lot of the manga is kind of nonsense. It's just, it's this weird techno future sort of thing. So it might not be everybody's cup of tea. It's not a classic like Kingdom Come that should absolutely live on your shelf. But I think that the edition that Dark Horse does, that's like, as I recall, partly color and partly black and white, but maybe it's all color, and it's just got, it just looks really nice. And I put it in here.
Cool. I'm going to pick up next with a book called Pyongyang, which you have probably seen in the indie section or the book section whenever you walk into your comic shop. It is by, now correct me, is it Guy or Guy?
I think it's Guy.
Guy Delisle.
And I think it's Guy Delisle, but I'm not really sure. It's I'm going on what we were told.
Yeah. Okay. So Guy Delisle or Guy Delisle. It looks like it's spelled Guy Delisle, but Guy Delisle, and it's a wonderful little. It's just a wonderful little book, drawn in quarterly, classic drawn in quarterly title. It's sort of it is very autobiographical. It's about his trip to Pyongyang. He's doing some animation work with one of their studios, and it's just sort of a black and white, wonderful little vignette of his day-to-day life there. And you see, how human some of the people are and how sort of, robotic they are. And you just get a really good glimpse of what it's like to live in North Korea for 3 months. And as I'm flipping through it now, I almost want to reread it right now. It's actually I forgot how charming it is. And, it's got sort of a melancholy quality to it too. But if you love world travel, if you like, if you're fascinated by North Korea in any way, shape or form, definitely pick this up.
Yeah, and you and I were collectively recommended all of Guy's titles.
Yeah.
And I have picked up Jerusalem since. And, just shout out to Drawn and Quarterly, like join their mailing list, because they always have a Black Friday sale where you get such awesome deals on this stuff. And
Heavens.
Great hardcover editions. You and I have bought a ton of them. And my edition of Jerusalem came from that last year. I still haven't read it, but it looks great sitting on my shelf, and I will absolutely read it and talk about it later.
Real quick, as you were saying that, I sadly was not subscribed to their mailing list, and I am, as we speak, fixing that mistake. No,
you were just relying on the annual text from me, like, holy shit.
Yes. Yes, I honestly was. I was like, Todd will tell me when there's something to see there. But no, I didn't even think about the fact that they had a killer little mailing list. It is, real quick, Drawn and Quarterly is that killer, like in the music scene in the 90s, like there were those killer indie labels that just did everything right and had a really specific point of view. Drawn and Quarterly is that. As much as we love and laud Image, Image is creator owned. And so you get a huge diverse swath of stuff, but Drawn and Quarterly, there's a certain aesthetic that you can always hope to find there. And it's always it is comic books for the coffee shop intellectual, at the end of in my mind. Like it's just wonderful. So definitely if you're not a Drawn and Quarterly fan or aficionado, in 2019, I challenge you to fix that.
Yeah, and I got another pick coming up a little bit later that I'll mention. But right now, I'll talk about another book that kind of blew up, and it wasn't really in comic shops. I don't think it was distributed through that main distributor that they use. But you can find it in any bookstore. It is called, and the mispronunciation is on purpose, it is called Everyone's a Aliebn When You're a Aliebn Too. Mm-hmm. And I talked about it in depth in episode number 52, and it is just such a wonderful, good feeling, like meditation on the human condition in this very playful, childish style or child-friendly style. And it's it's hard to say it's about, because it is about the human condition, but the story for that is that an alien comes to Earth, only interacts with plants and animals, and sort of learns about the human experience through that, about feeling sad and feeling happy and feeling anxious and needing space but also feeling alone, and it's just really beautiful. That's all I'll say about it.
Well, I'll jump to a title that is currently our most popular post on Instagram. Over 1,000 likes. I threw up a picture, or actually 2 pictures from it. It is the image title, A Land Called Tarot by Gail Bertrand. And it was, episode 61. I talk about it in full. Quick little summary. It is, if you were ever a fan of the Island magazine that Image did there for a couple years, this is one of the stories that appeared in Island. They later recollected it as a hardcover trade paperback, which I highly recommend you get it in. It is a totally silent, meaning no speech bubbles whatsoever, totally silent story. There's a series of vignettes. I don't even want to begin to describe it. It is surrealist fantasy art at the highest level. Every single panel could be, something you hang on your wall, or could be something, just a picture you stare at for hours on end. It's just absolutely wonderful and fantastic. If you want to get a glimpse of it, go to our Instagram feed. About halfway down, you're going to see a picture that just looks crazy. It's this old man sort of sitting on an ocean. That is just one example of many things you're going to find here. You can read it backwards to forwards, forwards to backwards. It doesn't really matter. It looks like something that you may have dreamed last night. But absolutely, if you appreciate art and fantasy art, and just really, want to see a graphic novel, operate in this format, like this is absolutely a pick for your shelf.
Definitely. You may not have noticed, but I threw another title in there for you to discuss right after this.
That's right. Well, you did. You put in Infidel, which we discussed very recently on episode 91. Infidel, oh my God. We talked about it over Halloween because it's basically a ghost story. A woman lives in an apartment building that is more or less, a Muslim woman lives in an apartment building that's basically haunted by the ghosts, sort of the demon ghost of racists and just racists and bigots. What's the other? Terrible people, terrible, awful, like kind of the worst of humanity haunts this apartment, and you get to see it's this fascinating, horrific look at it. At xenophobia, that's the word I was looking for. Xenophobia, racism, all of that. They're actually going to make a movie out of this thing, which
that's right.
Good Lord, the book was, the book is not meant for young kids. It has a disturbing quality to it, on the level of The Ring or something like that, where you're just like, it sits with you for a while. And the subject matter is very timely and, but just very well done. I mean, as a ghost story, as a horror story, it works really, really well. It's got a timeless quality to it, but it's definitely, meant for a 2018, 2019 audience. So Infidel, again, go back to episode 91 to hear us review that.
Yeah, and as I recall, we discovered it was on some crazy like NPR's list of greatest horror.
Yeah,
it wasn't even like a comic specific list, and we went, "Holy shit!" Like that's how scary it is that it's like in the literature list.
When I get really excited anytime I see any of the books I love appear on those 100 greatest books, regardless of medium. I hate to use this old, to dust off this old canard, but Watchmen, one of those books, Dark Knight Returns. Some of those books are really like these classic graphic novels are considered literature at this point, as they should be.
Absolutely.
So it's always exciting to see new things added to that list.
Well, speaking of literature, I think Bitch Planet is worth catching up on. It is another disturbing, especially in our current political climate, feminist take, sci-fi take on. It's sort of a Handmaid's Tale in space, if that doesn't sound too cheap, if that doesn't cheapen it too much or something. But it is just a great sci-fi take on a country that has like a religious fervor that is dictating how women can or cannot be agents of their own bodies, and then they are sent off to this prison planet. If they violate the rules. Kelly Sue DeConnick is the writer. It lasted 2 volumes, and then I think said political system kind of weakened their resolve to keep going on it. But they also put out a third volume that's not, I think it's canon, but it's not sequential. So it's like sort of side stories and stuff.
So hang tight. They stopped doing it because of the current environment.
I don't know that they stopped because of that. I just think that it was like they, plus they had other big projects coming up. And Kelly Sue, I think, has been pretty intimate with the Captain Marvel movie because she wrote that for a number of years. I hope I'm right about that. But we've talked about a couple other titles like that. Citizen Jack, I think, is the one that you've mentioned several times. Where it's like, all of a sudden it got too real and it was like, oh boy. But yeah, Bitch Planet, I talked in depth, episode number 53. What you got for us?
Well, let's see here. I could talk about, I think I will. Multiversity. Now, earlier I mentioned Grant Morrison utterly failing on Wonder Woman Earth 1. Multiversity is a tour de force. It's like all the great Grant Morrison stuff in one book. And this, I'm talking specifically about the hardcover trade paper. It's not even trade paperback. The hardcover graphic novel that collects the entire Multiversity run. And there's a lot of stuff. I don't even know if I can even talk about it at any length. Go listen to episode 57 to hear me.
It's convoluted for sure.
It is convoluted for sure. I mean, just a couple highlights. He has an entire chapter / issue, which is his take on the I was going to say Harlequin. That's not right. What's the original? The original heroes that the Watchmen are based on. Oh my God. Anyway, so like the original,
if you hadn't said it, I would have known, but go ahead.
The original characters that the Watchmen are based on, he does a take almost like when the Beatles met the Ruddles kind of a thing, where it's what would those original heroes have been? Because the Watchmen were meant to be that original group of characters, like the Question and not the Atom, but Blue Beetle. Is that right? I shouldn't even review this book right now.
And Charlton Comics is what you're thinking of.
Charlton, thank you, Christ in heaven. So yeah, the Charlton Comics characters were originally what the Watchmen were supposed to be. They couldn't get the rights, or Alan Moore was just not interested. So Alan Moore created his kind of variations on each of those characters. So Grant Morrison took them and reworked them, as they would be if they were the Watchmen. Essentially, that's one chapter. There's another chapter if Superman was a Nazi, if he had landed in Nazi Germany instead. Basically, it's a bunch of Elseworlds titles that are all interconnected in a really cool way. It all comes together in the end. And he's got a really great, really fun sort of map of the multiverse, the DC multiverse, and a bunch of different, like a guidebook of all the different Earths. So if you're really curious, like, what is Earth 18 about? What is Earth 23 about? Is there a black Superman in Earth 23? What's that about? Go grab that. But it's just like as a purely creative effort, it's fantastic. I whip it out once a year at least. And again, the hardcover, if you get it, grab it on Comixology to try it out. But if you're going to get the hardcover version. It is a collector's item for sure.
Yeah, and you'll hear us in that episode where I tried reading some of the single issues, and it definitely got lost. So I think collected edition is the way to go with that.
Absolutely, 100%.
I stacked you up again here because you had so many more picks in this section.
Oh, Death Note. That is me. Yeah. So back on episode 49, I reviewed my first manga, Death Note, which at the time had just come out as a Netflix movie. And so that's where I kind of learned about it. And then I saw the entire series in a really cool, kind of one of those like funky coffee shop comic bookstore bars, that appears in some cities. Denver's got one. And so I grabbed book one, the black edition, which all the pages are black. So it just looks really cool. It looks like the Death Note in the book, but the book is wonderful. The movie on Netflix was not. It left me really wanting more. And so I grabbed the book thinking, well, maybe the source material is better. And oh my God, it totally is. It's just a fantastic book about a young boy who finds this diary or this journal left behind by this demon. And you write somebody's name in that journal and that person dies. The journal is called the Death Note, hence the name. And then that demon ends up sort of befriending this boy and kind of following him around, and only the boy can see him. And so it's all about this. It's kind of Breaking Bad, about very similar to Breaking Bad. It's this young boy who just kind of falls down this rabbit hole of continuously making terrible decisions. And you literally have the devil on his shoulder sitting there the entire time, either egging him on or challenging him or telling him no, which makes him do the thing that he wants to do. It's just wonderful. If you are a light anime fan, this is definitely for you. I'm certainly a light anime fan. If you're a heavy anime fan, this is for you. Not anime, manga. If you're a big anime too, but if you're a manga fan or you want to get into manga, definitely recommend this. I think there's 7 or 8 books in the series, which is quite a bit. I've only done book 1, but I'm sure the rest of them I'll get to at some point and they'll be wonderful. So Death Note, again, episode 49. I talk about that.
Yeah, and then I feel like we've wandered through the indie comics and small press stuff. I'm going to bring us right back to the big 2.
Yeah.
Supergirl Being Super, which I talked about in episode number 49.
I completely forgot about this book.
It is just such a great... I did too, until I did that thing where I scrolled through all of our episodes to kind of remind myself of what we might want to include in a number 100 episode. Mm-hmm. It to me is like, it takes place when, Kara's already on Earth. It's not retelling the origin of Supergirl, but it has that feel of a year 1 book of like the character growth that happens behind the hero that sort of shapes them into the hero that they become. Mm-hmm. It is written by Mariko Tamaki and illustrated by one of my favorite artists, Joelle Jones. Joelle is currently writing and illustrating Catwoman. And she illustrated a lot of the Tom King run of Batman up to The Wedding. She may still be, or I don't know how much of that she did, but when the new Catwoman series spun off, she went with that. And I've loved her art for years, and I'll mention indie titles she's done in future episodes for sure. But Supergirl Being Super, great take on the character, number 49.
Now, do you want to talk about the next one on the list? Because this was, I'll just say what it is. It's Vision.
Yeah.
And I apologize, I don't have the author artist handy.
Oh, it's Tom King.
Tom King, of course.
So this came from our friend Drew, and in fact, we invited Drew on episode number 67 to talk about Vision. I can't remember if did it have a subtitle or something?
I don't think it did.
Yeah, so it was just this kind of novel, as far as I understood, not kind of, totally novel take on Vision, the character. Our friend Drew is a big fan of Tom King's writing. And had really, recommended all those Batman books to me. So we all read Vision and talked about it together as a group. And it is such a novel take. I mean, it's a good one for you and me, where it is like the Image Comics take on a Marvel superhero. It's dark and it's like the nightmare of science fiction that Vision really is, rather than this kind of glossed over hero. Ultron made him, right? Like, it's not a happy story inherently, and it's kind of twisted. What did you think about the art? I recall it, but
the art was I liked the covers and the variants better than the main panel art, but the story was so good I kind of settled into the main panel art pretty quick, quicker than I thought I would, because it has sort of all of it, even the covers have a sort of Norman Rockwell kind of vibe to it, which is trying, it's, and once you read the book and you kind of ingest it that way and you understand what they're trying to do tonally, the more innocent kind of art does work really, really well. It's a pretty lengthy book, so they're not going to, not every single panel is going to be as stylized as Kingdom Come would be, but it's, you get a lot of sense of that in the covers and the variants, and the art itself is completely fine. The story, it's definitely one of those, I think we talk about it on the episode. It's one of those books where the story and the intent is so strong that the art could have just been, as shitty as Frank Miller drew Dark Knight 2. And we probably wouldn't have cared as much because the story is so good. It's much better than that. I don't want to give any indication that this art is as poor as that. It's not. It's wonderful. But, if you flip through it and you're like, well, this looks a little plain and boring. Believe me, there are twists and turns and some really good, meaty, it reminds me a lot of sort of what they did with Ex Machina, which is this, in your own words, this kind of quiet, very intimate story about how technology can go wrong. And it has a lot of that feel to it.
Yeah. I wouldn't, maybe I would say you're being a little harsh on the art, but it's definitely more Big Two-ish art.
Yes, there we go.
I would say it's it disarms you because the art looks a little bit more conventional and the story is so unconventional.
That's what it is. Yep.
But I do imagine that was part of the discussion about it. But yeah, you're right. It's like the story is so good. I mean, yeah, it's maybe not our favorite art, but yeah, really, really crazy story about Vision.
Really good.
Yeah. Hit me with another one.
when we talk about the graphic novels worth having on your shelf, like, oh my God, that's like a poster boy for that sentence. Just absolutely go buy that thing. I have it digitally. I still haven't bought it physically, but it is happening physically.
And especially those standouts from Marvel or DC where you can go like, even if you're not into the superhero comics, you can read this and have it on your shelf and go, wow, that was really like, what a good take on that,
Yeah. What a great take. Another book kind of dipping back into the indie vibe again is a book called Local, which I see here I talked about in episode 89. I feel like it was a lot longer ago than that. It is by the good folks at Oni Press, which, I don't talk about enough. I think I read a lot of Oni stuff and then I don't talk about it on the show. So I want to give them a big shout out. They're a great little publisher out of Portland, as most of the good publishers are these days. But Local is this wonderfully, beautifully drawn graphic novel. It may have come out as single issues, I think, at one point, but it's meant to be a graphic novel. Absolutely. And it's about this young girl's life and how she goes from town to town, from situation to situation. Every chapter is sort of a different city that she's found herself in with different relationships, different struggles. And it's a huge, wonderfully, beautifully told coming of age tale, and has a really satisfying sort of ending that ties it all together. The graphic novel, I'm flipping through the hardcover version, has a lot of what I call DVD extras. So a lot of insight into the making of the story, the writing of it, the drawing of it, which, by the way, quick shout out, the deluxe version of Vision also has a lot of DVD extras.
Oh, so yeah.
If you're into the making of the book and the artistry behind it, what goes into that, like this, by all means, get the books that have a juicy, extra section. But yeah, this Local, quick shout out by Brian Wood and Ryan Kelly, are the creators behind it, and it's just it's some of the best line drawing, pencil drawing I've ever seen. It's almost exclusively in black and white, and it would almost be too intense if they tried to color this. The panels are just so beautiful as they are in black and white. And it actually tonally works for the story too. You get, her life is sort of, very dreary from time to time. And a lot of her situations are very black and white situations. You kind of look to find the shades of gray in between everything. So just a great book. Definitely worth having.
So many of the themes you touched on in that have to do with my next pick, which is from Drawn and Quarterly, Portland publisher. It is in black and white. It is called Mary Wept Over the Feet of Jesus. And I talked about it in episode number 66, and I could probably talk about it in a weekly episode. It is such an interesting book in the way it's put together, and the DVD extras in it, which aren't really even extras. They're integral to the book, which are like footnotes and explanations from the writer. I think Chester Brown. I'm sorry that I did not write it down here, but I believe that's the writer. And it is this book is deceptively simple in its illustration because its theme is very heavy. The theme and the argument of the author is that Jesus's mother was a prostitute, and he is coming at this from such a scholarly take on it that it is just like mind blowing. Like he's citing all this history and this examination of the Gospels. Now, I will note that Brown himself, he considers himself a Christian. This is not an anti-Christian like diatribe or something. He is also a John, like he is a public customer of prostitutes. So, just a little asterisk there. It's always interesting how, people's religions end up justifying the thing that they do in their personal life. But anyway, but it's just a fascinating book, and I can't, rate it high enough.
This brings me to probably one of my favorite books of all time. We're talking about our favorite books, period, but of the favorites, there are a couple that definitely rise to the very top. And this is, of course, the absolute creative debut tour de force of Jonathan Hickman, titled The Nightly News, published by Image. And I'm going to specifically shout out the 10th anniversary hardcover edition, which is what I own, and was the book that when I went into Bridge City Comics in Portland, shout out to those guys, one of the best comic shops you'll ever find, Bridge City Comics in Portland. I walked in and they had a whole Jonathan Hickman section of their wall, and this was prominently featured. I think it had just come out because it was 2015, so it was I think it was the 10th anniversary at that point. And they're like, oh, and I kind of gave them what I was into at the time, and they're like, you want to take this home. I'm so glad I did. It's Jonathan Hickman's very first thing he ever did. And he wrote it, he illustrated it. And his illustrations are very much, he takes pictures of real life people and situations and then kind of animates over those and then stylizes them and does kind of these really cool infographic-y kind of treatments. So visually, it's really unique and stunning. And if there's ever a book more suited to 2018, 2019, oh my God, this is literally about attacking the news, the news anchors, journalists. It's an assault on journalism. And the way he frames it at the time, he's got this group of vigilantes who are sniping out journalists because the way they view them is negative, not in a sort of Trumpian way, but in a much kind of broader societal sort of way. But you can, reading it now is almost scarier because you can infer a lot of current, topics and sort of current sentiment in the culture into this book. But he breaks up the pages with different little infographics talking about media, talking about education, drug use, all of this wonderful, wonderful context. He does that beautiful thing where some of the pages are just conversations without, they're just the script of the conversations and not necessarily, you don't see drawings. But I cannot say enough about this book. I don't want to spoil any of it. If you go back to episode number 72, which again doesn't seem like that long ago. I thought this is a lot longer ago. Episode 72, I go into full detail, but oh my God, this is the 10-year anniversary also has in its DVD extras lots of concept drawings, lots of notes about his color use. He's got all his Pantone colors listed. He's got all his variant covers. He's got the entire first script of issue 1 that he pitched. In there, you can literally read and see some of his concept drawings. This is, if you love a creator as much as I love Jonathan Hickman, this is a must have. It is. You can read it every year and see something completely new and fresh in it. It holds up just as well, if not better, than it did when it first came out. So yeah, this is, top of my list. Definitely one of my top 3 all-time favorites, for sure.
And we say, you talked about that specifically in episode number 72, but I feel like there was probably a good 6 months of our podcast that was just the Jonathan Hickman podcast.
Yeah.
So speaking of that, what's another title that he's written?
Well, I love me some Hickman, and there's another Image title. The dude's working on 27 consecutive titles at any given time. So I don't know how the hell he's pulling this off, but he's got another one called The Black Monday Murders, which I talk about in episode 64. I'm surprised I talked about this before I talked about Nightly News on an episode, to be honest.
Well, I know you'd mentioned Nightly News many times.
Oh, I know.
Before you
maybe it was one of those things where I was like, and finally I'm talking about, no, but I talk about the Black Monday Murders, which is an ongoing series. Nightly News was more of like a mini series. It has ended. Black Monday Murders is ongoing, and it is, holy crap. If you liked the Nightly News and you like Jonathan Hickman's indie style, now, Hickman's written a lot of stuff for Marvel, a lot of Avenger titles and things like that. But his indie stuff, his creator-owned stuff is always the best because he can just go hog wild. And in the Black Monday Murders, he basically takes the conspiracy of the Rothschilds and the sort of the big banking families, and he makes it real. And he makes it real in the fact that they do the secret deal with the devil and they control the world economies. And it's kind of this sort of mafia family versus mafia family kind of movie. But there's this detective who's trying to figure it all out in the meantime. Wonderfully drawn and illustrated. And I hate that I don't remember who the illustrator is. Hang on just a second while I look that up. Tom Coker, of course. Mm-hmm. Just that you look at the covers, and the covers kind of say it all. And each individual issue is almost like a case file. So it's kind of fun. You know, you can get the trade paperbacks too, but I highly encourage you to get the individual issues because there's a collectability to them. You feel like you're collecting the Black Monday murder cases as they come out, you know, and you're following along in real time. Definitely not for the younger reader. This is an adult, you know, this is a 21 and up or 18 and up title, in my opinion. But yeah, episode 64, I delve into that. And yeah, the Black Monday murders. If you see it, pick it up.
On the other end of the spectrum, I'll call out Lumberjanes, which I think is just a fantastic book. It's maybe not quite all ages, but absolutely. And it's also not specific for girls, for sure. Like I enjoyed the crap out of it and will continue to. And I think young boys should read it as well. But it is like about sort of a Girl Scout troop called the Lumberjanes, and magical and wild things happen to them while in this very realistic setting of like having to deal with real life problems and discuss real life issues. So it's definitely like, you know, probably like 10 years old might be too young, but like 12 and up, I think is good. You know, it's and it's very Pacific Northwest feeling, you know, they're out in the woods. And it is it's not just the landscape, but a lot of the issues they deal with are very progressive and but it is just super fun and super enjoyable. And I love the fantastic element in it. And I love the way it's drawn in such a way that's not, you know, it's not superhero comic booky at all, but it's also just so accessible without being cartoonish. You know, it never devolves into like patronizing young readers, and I think that's such a rare thing to find. It has a lot of creators on it, but I think Noelle Stevenson has been like the through line of it, if not just the sole creator. But also, I jumped in right in the middle, which I think is a perfectly acceptable thing to do because they've organized it like each volume feels very complete. There were themes from volume 5 that made me want to pick up volume 6 and continue to read, but I have not yet gone back and read like 1, 2, 3, 4 or, you know, or 7, 8, 9 or wherever they are now, but it is just awesome. Lumberjanes, episode number 80 was when I talked about that.
Can I say real quick, as I've been sort of jumping ahead just to make sure I have the info on upcoming books I'm going to talk about. I'm on the Drawn and Quarterly website. One of the most infuriating things about it is it's not clear at all how you buy books from them. Like there's a title they're talking about right now called the Snooty Bookshop that I'm like, ooh, I kind of want that. And in the article about the Snooty Bookshop, there's no buy now button. It's just like in bookstores now. It's like, but I want to buy it from you right now. And if you go search it, it's not available. It's so frustrating. Drawn and Quarterly, you need to fix your website.
Yeah, that is is it Grant Snyder that did that, or is it Tom Gold?
It is Tom Gold. Good job.
And he wrote a Moon Cop, which we talked about in episode. I'm trying to get there.
That's Moon Cop's guy. That's the creator. Wow.
Yeah. The Snooty Bookshop. Oh man,
interesting.
Can't even find it.
Well, while you look for that, I'm going to talk about another Drawn and Quarterly book.
Number 55. I talked about
number 55.
Yeah, I love his art. I think you have found a specific like title on Drawn and Quarterly that is not actually available online.
Oh God!
Because they released it as like it was like a special edition thing. It's a series of postcards that he illustrated.
Okay.
I think it was done I think it was commissioned for a certain bookseller or shop or something, and they, as his American distributor, are putting it out, but I don't know that it's I think you've hit a quirk, but you're right. There are definitely a lot of quirks to the Drawn and Quarterly website. Like
as wonderful as they are as a publisher, like their website's a little lacking, but we'll talk about that another day. A Drawn and Quarterly title that is worth talking about is a book called Wilson by Daniel Close. And that may sound familiar to you. There was a movie starring Woody Harrelson that came out a year or so ago, I think. That's how I learned about it. You know, in the trailer for the Wilson movie that's like based on the award-winning graphic novel or acclaimed graphic novel. So of course I had to go pick it up. I am holding the hardcover version, which anytime you can get a hardcover version of something, go do it. And the thing about Drawn and Quarterly's titles is that often their hardcover versions are the same price as the regular ones, or as Todd mentioned, if they have one of these amazing sales, these Black Friday sales or occasional sales, grab their hardcover editions. They're beautiful. You want to hold these things in physical hardcover form. But anyway, Wilson's about this guy named Wilson who's clearly on the spectrum somewhere. And it's kind of a sort of a couple of vignettes of his life. He's going back to try to reunite with his ex-wife. He finds out he has a daughter with that woman along the way. And every page is a series of 6 panels that are drawn completely differently from the previous page. Some of the drawing styles recycle throughout the book, but every time you turn the page, Wilson is drawn completely differently. Sometimes he looks like, Garfield might look. Sometimes he looks very stylized, very detailed. Sometimes he looks just completely lo-fi, or something like from Doonesbury, or there's a plethora of styles that are just wonderful and kind of fun to watch. And each style doesn't necessarily complement or coincide with the content, but you can tell that each style really works. It allows the jokes or the drama to play out very wonderfully. So it's kind of like a giant collection. You can almost imagine that each of these pages came out in a newspaper over the course of 52 weeks or something. I don't think that's what it was. No. But you get the sense that could have been. But it's wonderful. It's just a really great look at this guy's life. He's hilarious. He just doesn't care. He'll sit in a cafe and just start chatting with somebody he doesn't know and annoying them, and he won't seem to think or care that he's annoying them. I will say that the book is a lot lighter in my mind than the movie was. The movie got really depressing. The movie was great too, but it's just like almost went a little too dark. The book kind of maintains. The book is basically the movie, but it maintains a sort of lightness to it that I think the movie kind of didn't figure out as quickly as it could. But yeah, it's one of those titles that you're going to see it pop up since the movie's out. You're going to see it pop up on Netflix or Amazon, and it's just fun to have the book. If you like Garfield, if you like the Far Side cartoons, or any like I said, Doonesbury, or any of those kinds of higher level newspaper comics, definitely pick up Wilson.
I'm going to call an audible here and throw another pick that was also a sports reference, because you mentioned that changing art style.
Yeah.
And this book had just slipped my mind when we were putting this list together, but Terms and Conditions, which does not have a story, but the book is called Terms and Conditions. We talked about it in episode number 59. This is a book that you gave to me. It is literally the Apple App Store terms and conditions, or iTunes terms and conditions. Those are just thrown into the speech and thought bubbles throughout this book, and every page is illustrated in a different famous comic book art style, whether it's a take on, I think they're literally like matching panel for panel, and where it's like Steve Jobs, in the Fantastic Four pose or whatever, but it is just as like an artifact of great art. Like, this is so worth having as a physical copy. And I just thought I'd throw it in there because your Wilson review reminded me of it.
Oh, I'm so glad you did. Thank you. Yeah.
So, I would say those are the ones we wanted to hit a list of things that we talked about. We dedicated episodes to them, but we may not have mentioned them before or since. But our last segment, which is this going to wrap us up, are the things in 100 episodes we have probably mentioned 120 times.
Yeah.
Because these are books that we just absolutely love and we keep talking about. And it's like, when you're talking about what's not worth having on your shelf, what you should check out and what's absolutely worth having on your shelf. These are about 10 books that you and I would say worth it. Like, go get this. So kick us off on that. I reorganized this list a little bit while you were talking because I wanted us to skip back and forth.
Yeah.
But so I put you on the top. Kick us off.
Well, as we speak, I'm pulling off of my shelf right now my copy of Superman American Alien by Max Landis as the writer, and just a greatest hits of artists. I'll read them off to you because they all deserve credit. Nick Dragata, Tommy Lee Edwards, Jolie Jones, Jay Lee, Francis Manapool, and Jonathan Case Jock. It is a collection of single issues in graphic novel form. I highly recommend you get the graphic novel. I highly recommend you get the hardcover. But it is probably the best. It is definitely my favorite Superman story of all time, because it shows Clark Kent's life growing up to become Superman. The whole thing ends just as he's putting on the suit, and really embracing being Superman. So everything is leading up to that, but not in a lame Smallville way. This is him at different stages in his life, starting with him as like a little 10-year-old kid or 8-year-old kid. And each stage is drawn by different artists. So the first chapter is Nick Dragata's art, which I love. And it shows just Clark Kent in school, kind of wrestling with, these powers and being different. And there's this really tender scene with his mom that's really incredible. Then it shows him as a little punk teenager, drawn by somebody else. It shows him as a young man. And it really puts together who Clark Kent is, first and foremost. Like, who is the man Clark Kent? And how does he reconcile that with this other thing that he might be, which is Superman? He doesn't know, at least early on, he doesn't know that he's from Krypton. He doesn't even know any of this stuff. He doesn't know who his people are. So it's literally him as kind of this immigrant and a stranger in a strange land, trying to figure his life out. And it is so wonderful. They literally, if they do this book as a movie, it is guaranteed to be the most popular Superman movie they'll ever have. And a lot of people rag on it for some weird reason. I don't know why. Maybe just because it is more kind of a grounded look at Clark Kent. Maybe just with all the Superman throughout all of history, it's been done here and there. But I love this take. Definitely, I think, did we ever talk about it on an episode? I don't even think we did.
We have not dedicated an episode to it.
I'm surprised.
We've got some great crossover here, like a recommended if you like. If you read Supergirl Being Super, check out Superman American Alien. And if you read Superman American Alien, read Supergirl Being Super. There's that just tie into the adolescence of these cousins from Krypton, of course, but also the Joelle Jones tie-in right there. I didn't even know she was one of the artists that worked on this until you just now mentioned her. So yeah, I mean, that's
well, and real quick too, Jay Lee is also the artist on Before Watchmen Ozymandias, which I talked about very, very recently. So you'll see, as you're reading that chapter, all of a sudden you're like, wait, this looks like Ozymandias. It's because Jay Lee did the art. And that particular chapter, I should say, is where Clark first runs into Batman, and it is very satisfying.
Interesting. And Jay Lee is also was the artist on at least several of the arcs of Batman and Superman. Yeah. That book. And yeah, his work is stunning. I'll go a different direction, back to the indie stuff, I guess, if you can call Image indie, even though it's huge. I have talked about Saga on a number of occasions. This is a book that it's one of those that's kind of annoying in that everyone who reads a lot of comics agrees you should be reading this one. Although I don't think you are. I don't think you're reading it. But
I haven't started. It's not for any lack of interest. Right. It's one of those books that I kind of want a clear plate before I really get into it.
I have the same feeling about the next book on your list. But Saga is a sci-fi tale, and it starts out, it's being narrated by the baby who eventually becomes a small child. She's telling the story of her parents, presumably when she's old enough to talk. So there's sort of thought bubbles of this child telling the story of how her parents met, and they were on opposite sides of a war between a planet and its moon, and just this sort of dumb racial divide, where the people with the horns that live on the planet don't like the people with the wings that live on the moon or something. And but you might take from that volume 1 that it's going to there's going to be crossover to sort of contemporary issues, and there definitely is, but this is not like a political take on anything. I mean, in as much as like all literature is political, but it goes wild in stuff, and it's just one of those wonderful books where the artist and the writer are collaborating so closely and throwing things back and forth, and it's so there's like a race of aliens that are royalty, and all their heads are basically television sets. And it is, it's like just wild stuff like that. Like, what if there were a talking walrus that's like a fisherman that they befriend on this other weird planet? And then, yeah, sure, there he is. So it's just every issue, every volume, I should say, is bonkers. It's definitely one of those where because of the way the first couple of volumes went with the specific resistance story, I thought it was going to, I thought it had a wrap up in mind, and now I'm not so sure. And I haven't really checked in on the news of it to see where they've wrapped up, but I just love Saga. Art, writing, everything. Boy, I knew you'd put me on the spot with that. I'm vamping quickly while it's isn't it Kieran Gill? Wait, am I wrong? No, it's Brian K. Vaughan. Fiona Staples is the artist. Yeah. Yeah.
Cool. Well, like you said, the next book is equally sprawling, equally, it's been running just almost as long. I think it may have started around the same time Saga did. Also on Image, it is East of West. And, this is probably the, Nightly News is my favorite Hickman title just as a work. But East of West is what really, I think, truly got me back into comics full steam back in 2014. End of 2014. I ended up picking up the one-shot East of West, The World, just kind of by happenstance over Christmas in 2014. I was just like, I want all of this. And I think they had put out 3 trade paperbacks at that point. So I immediately bought volumes 1, 2, and 3 and just fell in love with both Hickman's writing and Dragata's art. Nick Dragata illustrates it. And it is clearly, and they've admitted this, it's clearly one of those titles where there is a give and take. Nick Dragata draws what he wants to draw, Hickman writes what he wants to write, and they sort of craft each arc, each episode, each issue to that end. And it's just a perfect synthesis of those two guys. Like they really get each other on a level that I just really love. You were going to say something.
There is an end in sight for that, right? Like we know when it's wrapping up, because this is where I've read volume 1 and was like, oh my God, I'm going to become obsessed with this. I got to hold back.
Yeah. Well, I think they have since put out, I think they're on the 3rd omnibus, which is like the East of West, I think they collect 4 trade paperbacks and do an omnibus. So yeah, they're getting close. It's years. So it's 3 years of the apocalypse. Basically, story, if you're interested, I talk about it a lot on episode 66, but if you're interested in a quick hit, basically it is an alternate timeline where, right after the Civil War was fought, a big asteroid hits, which is essentially Kansas City, Missouri, and kind of stops everything in its tracks. Fast forward to a point where the South never, basically there was a stalemate, so the South became its own country. The United States, the northern colonies became their own country or just stayed the United States. The Kingdom of Louisiana became just basically the kingdom, became Wakanda for all intents and purposes. The free slaves formed their own kingdom. Texas, of course, split off and formed its own country, the Republic of Texas. The Chinese ended up invading the West Coast and created the PRA, the People's Republic of Asia, or Asia or America. But it's basically, the Chinese have taken over the entire West Coast. And this is what really hooked me. The American Indians, I think Red Cloud pulled the Genghis Khan and united all of the tribes under one banner, and the American Indians formed the Endless Nation. And when they did that, they put aside their spiritual shamanism and sort of their holistic approach and became just utterly obsessed with technology to the point where they became the technological leaders and manufacturers and innovators of the entire world.
Yeah, they're almost the Wakanda.
They are almost the Wakanda, but there's a lot of the kingdom of that looks very Wakanda-esque too. But it's really, so you have this dynamic going on. And meanwhile, the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse come back sans death. And so the 3 of them are running around as kids trying to bring about the end times, while Death, who looks a lot like Clint Eastwood or Josh Holloway in white, is running around for his own. He's got his own kind of purpose too. So it's a Western. It's sort of a neo-punk or future punk Western. It is the perfect synthesis and blend of a lot of different genres. Unlike what's that stupid Daniel Craig, Cowboys and Aliens. It is not like that at all. When you hear you kind of futurist Western, it works.
Put that out of your mind.
You put that out of your mind forevermore.
We'll pretend.
I have
director of Iron Man didn't do that in between Iron Mans.
Oh my God, I forget that happened. Well, and it's also didn't. Who's the dude who wrote who co-show ran Lost? The glasses guy.
Damien Lindelof.
Lindelof. Yeah, he was involved in it too, and no one learned their lesson apparently. But East of West, oh my God, trust me, this is one of those series. Oh, and by the way, Amazon is freaking making it a show, which is going to be either the greatest thing I've ever seen or the most disappointing thing I've ever seen outside of American Gods. So hopefully they get it right. It's going to be sprawling and wonderful, and it's bonkers. It's wonderful. It's got heart. It's got amazing action sequences, and Dragata just crushes the drawing. The illustration throughout the entire thing, color is just perfect. So anyway.
We definitely mentioned that on many episodes, but number 66 for an in-depth look at Volume 1. I got another Image title that I actually haven't mentioned in recent episodes as much because it's finished its run. Yeah. But in early episodes, specifically our second episode, which we titled 0.5, is this book called Chew by John Layman and Rob Guillory. It's on Image. And the reason we had a 0.5, just for some more history during this episode 100, is that we did episode 0, which we thought was like our pilot. And then we said, you know what, let's just do a full comic books episode. Yeah. So we chatted for like, who knows, 90 minutes or something. And the damn thing got cut off in the middle of it. And I don't think we knew until we went to mix it. And at the time we had all these technical, this long way around mixing our episodes. So we ended up putting out sort of half of that conversation, just calling it a 0.5. And then a couple episodes later, we tried to redo all the comics that got cut off. So I definitely talked about Chew then. It's about a detective whose last name is Chu, C-H-U. But he has these sort of superpowers, even though they're not really like superpowers. They're more like mystical power. I don't know. Maybe they are superpowers. I don't know, but they're food involved. Whatever he tastes, he can learn the entire history of it. So Chew is a pun. But then you come to find out that everyone in this world, not everyone, but like there is a bunch of people that have food related powers. There's this girlfriend that can write about food. She's a critic, and she can write about food in a way that makes you literally taste it in your mouth. And then you start to find out that all of Chew's family, they have different powers, and it's sort of, there's like this zombie sort of tie-in because he can eat like a dead person and find out how they died, which helps him as a detective. Then they bring in vampires because they basically do nothing but eat people as well. And it is bonkers. There are so many crazy Easter eggs in the art. It has this really unique, like sketchy kind of style that's just really angular and loose. And it's really funny, but it has all the stuff from Image that you might expect, like, or that you want to feel in a zany book like this. Like there's conspiracies and there's aliens and there's, weird governmental bureaucracy that, he's working for the Food and Drug Administration, I think. And they like carry guns, it's like a militarized food police. It is just nuts. And it went 12 volumes. I actually have purposefully not even read the last 2 or 3, I think, because like a fine meal, I want to savor it. So I've talked about Chew a lot, and will probably do so in the future.
I'm glad you brought it up. I forgot you used to reference it quite a bit. So it's quite fitting to have on this list right here. Another one that I reference quite a bit is The Wicked and the Divine. And that is, you talk about pop hits in the comics world, like the number one song in the country right now. Like this has got to be one of them. You say The Wicked and the Divine to a certain, a large swath of comics readers, especially young, and largely female too, I've noticed. There is a fervor for Wicked and Divine that I rarely see in other comics, which is shocking that they haven't yet figured out the TV show. They were supposed to be developing it, and I don't know whatever happened to that. And they need to make this thing. It is, I don't even know what to say. Every several years, a certain number of gods reincarnate as young people, and they have 2 years to live before they all die. And in this particular iteration, they've come back as pop stars, and which, no pun intended, that's actually appropriate considering that the whole thing's kind of a pop hit anyway. But they come back as pop stars, and there's this young girl named Laura who's kind of our avatar into that world. And they've been running now, good Lord, I think they're like East of West. They are also wrapping up. They're in their final arc. I think they'll be East of West to the finish line, but it is wonderful. Now there's a couple volumes in between where it got really muddy. You know, volumes 1 and 2 are fantastic, really tight, good, amazing storytelling. Volumes 3, 4, 5 get a little muddy, but since about volumes 6 and 7, it's really started to pick back up again. It's really focused again. So go back and listen to episode 95, a very recent episode. I get into a recent volume, but I talk about the series at large. And Wicked and Divine. I mean, it's one of those, you know, when you think about Image comics in the 2010s, you think obviously Walking Dead. You think East of West, you think Saga, and you think Wicked and Divine. Those are I think they're heavy hitter titles.
Yeah, and another one I think is an upcoming heavy hitter for Image. It's sort of like Saga in that I just find so many people that are like, yeah, of course I read that, and that is Paper Girls, which starts out in the 1980s with this group of girls that deliver papers, and it's specifically on Halloween night that they have to go deliver the papers on bicycle at like 4 a.m. And some strange things happen involving like some aliens and some creatures and some time travel, and it fits so well with what we've seen in Stranger Things since then. It does not capitalize so much on the 80s nostalgia because it is immediately like volume 2. They're in a totally different time, and they're getting, different people are getting stranded in different times and different things are happening. And it is, it's so interesting to me because it goes in ways that you just can't predict. I talked about volume 3 on episode number 47. So I would say check in with that because I feel like that was sort of the volume that hooked me back again. Like, volume 1 I loved, and then volume 2 I was like, I don't know where this is headed. And then when 3 happened, I went, oh, this is bonkers. I'm in, and just strapped myself in. So I'll leave it at that because I want to kind of leave the mystery there.
Well, I also point out that the Paper Girls has a very specific drawing style that's very, very unique and very fitting, I think, for the material. So yeah. If you want a good, unique, very different, very specific art style or art direction, pick it up for that alone.
And it's Cliff Chang, and I can't remember what else he's done that we've talked about, but this is another Brian K. Vaughan written title. So recommend it if you like Saga.
The next 2 titles I'm gonna do together because they are titles we talk about a lot. And strangely, we have never done an individual episode reviewing either, mainly because we just talk about them all the goddamn time. I kind of feel like that's almost served the books, but
totally. And we talk about how we should do a dedicated episode.
Yeah. So,
we shouldn't because we talk about it so much.
Very rarely do we do an episode where we review a book where we don't reference in some way, shape, or form either Watchmen or The Dark Knight Returns. We did it in this episode, in fact. So, when you talk about the best graphic novels of all time, the most literary graphic novels of all time, Watchmen and Dark Knight Returns are usually on that list, if not always on that list. Watchmen, of course, Alan Moore, and I just forgot his name, Dave Gibbons. Jesus.
Yeah, Gibbons.
And then Frank Miller, obviously, Dark Knight Returns, with some other folks involved on both. But yeah, DC, that was DC in the 80s, and man, they were pushing the limits long before Image came around and started to really show us what comics could be. DC in the 80s was just crushing it.
And I think you got to compare it to Marvel in the 80s too and say they were crushing it in a way that Marvel was not.
Not at all. And then, and this is, keep in mind, Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen was even before Arkham Asylum, which really pushed the boundaries in like ways that I'm not even still comfortable yet taking on. So like DC was on an avant-garde little role in the 80s due to a number of things. If you ever want to get into that, the Blu-ray for The Watchmen has a really great documentary about the book, but it also delves into heavily the climate at the time, the creators at the time, and who was involved in really stretching those limits. So pick those 2 books up for sure.
Yeah, and when we were making our list, I sort of organized these last 3 together because I think because there is such not just the DC connection, but the Batman connection. So I'll let you lead into this one as well because this is I think I've read it, but hit us with it.
I own it. It's The Killing Joke.
Yeah.
And you famously, if you listen to the show the entire way through, first, God bless you. But secondly, you may remember an episode where Todd went to Comic-Con and saw the kind of the debut, the premiere of Killing Joke animated movie, and was not happy with it. And I was very disappointed, considering that the book is actually very good, written by, again, Alan Moore, and Brian Boland did the art. I have in my hands the updated color, which I prefer,
that's right,
largely controversial. To give you some clarity, the original coloring was a lot more neon and harsher color tones, and a lot more sort of just very contrasty. The updated color is way more earth tones, almost like a noir in some ways. It's not black and white, but it's got much more muted tones. I prefer it. I think it settles the story nicely, gives it a little bit more seriousness. But it's a very short book. It's not long.
Yeah.
I mean, think about Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns. Those are heavy, massive books. This is very short. It's almost like a single issue in length. But it's, what happens when the Joker, you kind of get a Joker origin story, and then you also get a side, a present day story of what happens when the Joker escapes Arkham and tries to teach Batman how one bad day can ruin somebody. In this case, that somebody is Commissioner Gordon.
Yeah.
So I don't want to spoil anything else. It has one of the most...
I'm pretty sure we spoiled it in episode number 20.
We totally did. But it also has one of the most controversial endings of a book that is deliberately vague. But if you know the people who wrote it, and if you're in the know, there's an ending you can take away that's pretty definitive. But if you're not, you can still take away you can take away a lot of different things.
I will say that ending, there is now a canonized version of it, I believe, because in a recent Tom King issue written by Tom King, I believe he refers to that ending and kind of settles the question. It's interesting.
What does he say?
That he spared him, that Batman laughed with him and then let him go.
I don't like that at all. I hate that. I see, for me, you've got the Dark Knight Returns as one, like the entire history of Batman is kind of like a choose your own adventure book. So Grant Morrison put it really wonderfully. He's like, you can almost take every decade of Batman as like a section of his life. Like the 60s, with the Adam West Batman was like all psychedelic. Batman was, Bruce Wayne was in his early 20s, everything was getting a little weird. And, you started seeing like the actual like onomatopoetic, right. When he hits somebody, he sees that. And you can kind of go through the era and stitch up a nice, basically all the Batman stories are relevant until you get to Dark Knight Returns and The Killing Joke, which are almost like, your choose your own adventure. Like, does Batman, live to a ripe old age and then have an existential crisis? Does he, try to make amends with the Joker and end up killing him? Or in the case of our final pick, the White Knight, does he reveal himself to the world to try to de-escalate everything that he's caused? All three of these books, The Dark Knight Returns, The Killing Joke, and The White Knight, are almost like three endings to the Batman story based on what you want to see. You pick your own ending, and they're all wonderfully valid, but The White Knight might be my favorite because I
love the way you're putting that. Yeah, that's really interesting to think about. These are the three endings. Yeah.
Yeah, it's choose your own adventure. So you can if you're like, I wonder what would have been like if Batman had just killed it. Because if he killed the Joker at the end of The Killing Joke, which it's my opinion that he does, the police are showing up. Like, the police are coming right then and there. So they're going to see that he killed the Joker, and that's going to be the end of Batman. And you don't physically need to see everything from there, because it's going to be really depressing. So in the case of The White Knight, you get a little taste of that, because The White Knight flips the script and shows you the Joker becomes Jack Napier. He finds a way to not be the Joker anymore, and he reverts to his normal, sane self, which is, I love that he's named Jack Napier after the Jack Nicholson character in the Batman movie, which is really funny. And then Batman almost goes crazy as a result. So they almost flip, because Batman can't handle the fact that everybody's treating Jack Napier like a normal, regular dude with nothing up his sleeve at all. He's just an upstanding citizen. That's making Bruce Wayne crazy, and he starts making really terrible decisions. And we talk about The White Knight on episode 71, and it is probably, dare I say, was it our favorite thing of last year?
I think it came close. Yeah, it's hard for me to think of anything that was bigger than that. I guess it just wasn't fully in the year. It wrapped up in 2018, but I think it actually started
You are
the year
correct.
before. But yeah, it was huge, and it was just art was beautiful as well. I'm kicking myself.
Sean Murphy.
Yep, I was wondering if you mentioned that.
Wrote and drew it with help from Matt Hollinsworth.
Yeah,
and it is. Oh my God! Like that episode, we love on that book for an entire hour on episode 71. But you know the way the colors are perfect. The way he draws Gotham City is perfect. Everything is just. Sean Murphy, I would love to read any of his Batman takes from now. Like he should be the only guy allowed to write Batman for the next 5 years.
I think that's how the Tom King fans feel.
Oh, really? Well,
I mean, and Tom King's been on it for a long time. I don't think he did a bad job, but I've read a couple of Tom King arcs, and they did not draw me into reading more arcs. But I think that's more because of the continuing nature of it, which is the thing we talk about all the time in this podcast, is like, you know, if you've been writing the Batman for 5 years, I don't know. I'm not into that soap opera for that long, you know. Full disclosure, the Tom King arcs I've read of Batman are leading up to the wedding to Catwoman, so it's specifically like soap opera-esque in certain moments. So I shouldn't be judging the body of Tom King's work, but I just think it's that thing of like, man, if you've written, you know, if there's 10 volumes memorializing what you've written for one, you know, in one series of arcs, it's kind of hard to know where to jump in, which is what we love so much about White Knight and Killing Joke and Dark Knight Returns, is they are those just sort of glimpses in. You're just sort of popping in and out. And especially in the case of Killing Joke, you don't really know what to think when you pop out of it. How did this end?
Yeah.
And, you know, then along comes Tom King to settle it.
And somebody else will come after him to settle it again. So it's, you know,
I know. We talked about this, I want to say, in the Crisis episode, which was our last episode, number 99. And it's a recurring theme here on those long running titles. And so it's great to wrap up with 3 new takes on a long running character. Because I would just prefer this. There's a weird thing happening with continuity where the Killing Joke actually, there's an event in it that became canon, and it was very controversial at the time. And it's maybe it's still echoing around the DC universe. And especially when they did their rebirth a few years ago and they returned to the original Batgirl. So basically what they did is Joker shoots Barbara Gordon and paralyzes her. And DC decided to make that canon and not a Elseworlds kind of thing, and just say, hey, Batgirl has been paralyzed by this bullet. But it gave her this interesting new arc as Oracle and the leader of the Birds of Prey. And I loved that. I loved that character, and I loved the new Batgirls. And I always talk about this. I mean, they're both great, Cassandra Cain and Stephanie Brown, but I love the Stephanie Brown arc that happened in the New 52. And just, it was so cool to see Barbara as the mentor, you know, and see her as like the Batman character, how Batman mentors his Robins, even though he just keeps getting them killed. And it was, it was just very cool. And then they decided to retcon all that with the rebirth and put Barbara back in the Batgirl suit. But somehow the Killing Joke still happened, and it's being mentioned in this, you know, Tom King arc. And it's like, oh my gosh, like what? Throw the whole continuity out. We know who Batman is. You know, just tell stories in short versions like White Knight, because that was so cool to see.
Oh, so and to your point, I don't necessarily want more of stories in the world of the White Knight. I just want Sean Murphy to touch more of these. Like, Sean Murphy gets the aesthetic of Batman probably better than anything else I've ever seen ever. And it's like, I would love to see him maybe go back and do another one-shot story from maybe earlier, or, you know, maybe show us what a good, I mean, I'd love to see a really good Riddler story under Sean Murphy's tutelage. You know, like they do this beautiful thing in White Knight where they sideline every other major Rogues Gallery villain in a really, like, in a way that makes sense.
Oh yeah. I was like, wait, what are you talking about? They're all in there, but no, the way they dispatch them is...
Yeah, but they're not like, you know, because if they were all allowed to kind of run around, it would be really hard to tell the story. So right away they do this clever thing to kind of put them in a box. that works very well. But I'd love to see Sean Murphy do the Riddler. Like, we haven't had, and you tell me, scream bloody murder, at your speaker if this is not true. Have we ever had like the definitive Riddler story yet? Like in the same, we've had these really good Joker stories. Have we had like, oh my God, this is the Riddler story to beat all Riddler story? Like, have we had that yet?
I don't know. I can't think of one. I love his portrayal in the Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale books, which I put on this list, and then we decided not to talk about things that we might talk about in upcoming episodes.
That's true. Yep.
But in Long Halloween, I liked his depiction, but as I recall, he does not end up being. It is not a Riddler story. It is another Rogues Gallery story. So, yeah, I mean that's a good point. He is there, man, and you're making my brain go crazy because in that arc. In the wedding issue, in the wedding volume of the Batman that just came out like a couple months ago or whatever, there's a Joker's prominent throughout, and there's a scene where Joker mentions the laughter, and he's referring to the Killing Joke, but he also talks about he's saying this to Catwoman. He says, "Did Edward ever tell you his theory about me?" And so they're talking about how the Riddler had like a psychologist's opinion on Joker and was telling the other rogues about it. And it's a cool moment, but yeah, that's a good question. Please, if you as a listener know of any great Riddler story, let us know. I'll tell you, be interested.
If we're ever going to get a Batman movie again, and I hope it's a while before we do, but if we do,
long while.
They have got to find a way to make it a pure, straight up detective story where the Riddler's the main antagonist.
Oh yeah.
It's almost, almost in the vein of Kevin Spacey in Seven, where it doesn't have to be as gruesome, but he's set up all these puzzles for Batman to solve. And it's not, there's no high technology. I mean, you can have some of the gadgets and stuff too, but it's mainly him solving this giant mystery. Like, I want to see the intellectual Batman movie that we've never gotten yet.
You just made me angry all over again that there's another Joker movie coming out.
I am in the rare minority of people who I'm okay with this Joaquin Phoenix Joker movie. Give it to me, because they're actually making they're making it all so different that it's like, well, let's see what it looks like when it's this different. I mean, I may eat those words, but we'll see. We have a lot to look forward to.
Yeah.
Teen Todd.
You know what else? Let's look forward to 100 more episodes.
Let's do. Yeah. And we'll probably get there since we've been on a weekly schedule. We'll probably get there even sooner than this one. This took a good couple years to get to.
Yeah. Well, let's caveat being that when Game of Thrones last season comes out, our attention will be fully distracted.
That's true. We may have to go on a slight hiatus, or at least you may hear a lot of Game of Thrones episodes inserted into Panelism to get you to listen to that show. So,
have you started your rewatch yet?
I've been waiting until probably mid-February, because once I do, I'm not going to do anything else. So I need to.
Jumped in. I'm already on season 2.
Okay. I don't know if I can take it. I don't know if I can take all those,
intense, man. But
when Joffrey's back in it, when he's back, and you're just like, all you're doing is just waiting for him to get killed. I mean,
oh man. I honestly, watching him be such a dick in season 1, I had this very vivid memory of watching the Purple Wedding with my friends when no one expected something so dramatic to happen so early in a season. And just my joy at watching their reaction to Joffrey die that was such a good moment. So I did at least experience that. I was like, this guy's a dick, but I can remember my friends freaking out about that and me just feeling so happy. I'll say my recommendation is don't just watch the last season. Go back and watch the whole thing, because there are so many things planted in the early seasons that have paid off later that it is awesome.
Ned telling Jon Snow, the next time I see you, I'll tell you about your mother. And the next time if he had lived, the next time that Ned Stark would have seen Jon would have been part of the Night's Watch. And they've made it clear, the Night's Watch is beyond the ruling or the grip of the king. The king could not have what the hell is Stannis' brother's name? Who's the original king?
Robert.
Robert couldn't have done shit to John at that point. So Ned could have said, yeah, guess what? You're a secret target. He could have told him all this stuff that we're now finding out. Like, that was part of Ned's plan. It was like, okay, I'm going to get you to the Night's Watch. You're going to be safe. And then I'm going to finally tell you everything where,
yeah.
Like,
Ned was protecting a Targaryen while Robert was slaughtering Targaryens.
Yes. In episode 1, we learn that. I think episode 1, we learn this, and it's like, oh my Christ, like they telegraph that. And to be, well, if you want to hear more about Game of Thrones and our take on it, go find Wednesday in Westeros. It is a wonderful show on the Panelism Network. I think we've done 3 or 4 seasons of it, and we will be doing the final season to coincide with the final season of Game of Thrones. And we can't wait. And so join us there too. We'll definitely be talking more GOT.
Yeah, and we'll probably get into it pretty soon because I got thoughts. But in the meantime, let's sign off. This has been an epic podcast, number 100. Yay, my reggae horn is not loaded up. I can't hit the reggae horn. Where can people find us?
You can find us on Instagram. We are panelism.inc. That's our username. We're also on Pinterest now. We are just simply Panelism. And our website is panelism.inc. That's www.panelism.inc, where you can find all of our episodes. Every episode we referenced on this show. Go back, go into the back catalog, relive some of our reviews. If there's a book that we talked about, Todd was really good about figuring out all the episodes where we talked about these books. So if you want to hear our full take on anything we talked about today, go back, enjoy the back catalog of Panelism. That's all there for you. And I want to echo your sentiment. It's been a really good 100 episodes. It's only going to get better from here. I think we're really hitting a really fun stride now. So I think 2019 is going to be a lot of fun.
And I will, just as you said that, I will drop this guide we have to our episodes in the show notes for number 100. So that should give you a little guidebook on where to jump to next.
Yeah, and until the next episode, sir, happy reading to you and to our listeners, and I'll see you then.
All right. Here's to 100 more.